The Kernella woman sells a slave that her daughter fell in love with, but she didn't know how things were about to change. What if the love of your life was ripped from you in the dead of night? What if the person who swore to protect you was the very one who betrayed you? In 1858, in the heart of the American South, a young woman from the elite faced the most painful choice: obey her father or follow her heart. But fate had a twist in store that no one could have imagined. What happens when love defies the chains of injustice? Stay here and discover a true story of faith, courage, and redemption that will change your perspective on the true meaning of freedom. The warm June breeze carried the scent of magnolias across the riverside plantation in Georgia. Between the white columns of the mansion, 19-year-old Catherine Ashford gazed at the horizon, her blue eyes brimming with unshed tears. Her heart belonged to a man she could never call her own. Not in the eyes of the world, not in the eyes of her father, the dreaded Colonel Thomas Ashford. Elijah was unlike any man Catherine had ever known. Tall, with deep eyes that reflected a wisdom beyond his 25 years, he carried a battered Bible in the pocket of his patched shirt. Even under the weight of the invisible chains of slavery, his faith remained unwavering. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," he whispered as he worked in the fields, and Catherine listened, hidden behind the oak trees. Their encounters were brief, stolen. A quick chat when she carried water to the fields. A lingering glance during Sunday worship in the plantation chapel, where enslaved people and masters worshipped the same God, but on opposite sides of the sanctuary. "Miss Catherine," Elijah said one afternoon, his voice low but firm, "God showed me in a dream that there is a greater purpose for my life, that these chains are not eternal." "I pray for it every night," Catherine confessed, her heart racing. But their love was not as well kept a secret as they had imagined. Mammy Ruth, the oldest housekeeper in the house, had noticed. And worse still, the colonel himself was beginning to suspect. When Thomas Ashford discovered his daughter teaching Elijah to read by candlelight in the library, something inside him broke. "You have brought dishonor to this family," thundered the colonel, his eyes bloodshot with fury. "Tomorrow, that black man will be sold, and you will never utter his name again." Catherine fell to her knees. "Father, please. He's innocent. It's all my fault." But the colonel had already made his decision. That same night, a black carriage arrived at the plantation. A cruel-looking man, dressed in dark clothes and smoking a thick cigar, got out with a sinister smile. "Colonel Ashford," said the man, his voice gruff, "I heard you have some top-quality merchandise to sell." His name was Silas Merchant, and Catherine would never forget his face as long as she lived. Dawn arrived cruel and merciless. Catherine hadn't slept. She had spent the entire night on her knees, praying and begging God for a miracle. At 5 in the morning, the sound of chains dragging on the stone floor echoed through the courtyard. Catherine ran to the window and saw Elijah being led away by 2 overseers. Even in handcuffs, he walked upright with dignity. Their eyes met for one last moment. Elijah moved his lips silently. "Have faith." Catherine ran down the stairs, her bare feet hitting the cold marble. Her mother, Eleanor Ashford, tried to stop her, but she broke free. Father, don't do this!" Catherine shouted in the main hall where the colonel was signing the sales papers. "Go back to your room," Thomas ordered without even looking at her. Silas Merchant counted the bills with ink-stained fingers. "Excellent deal, Colonel. This specimen will fetch a good price in the New Orleans market." New Orleans? Catherine felt the world spin. It was hundreds of miles away, practically another universe. No. Elijah was shoved into an iron cart. 6 other enslaved people were already there, their faces marked by despair. But Elijah picked up his battered Bible and began to recite aloud, "The Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves the crushed in spirit." Catherine ran to the wagon, clinging to the railings. Elijah, I'll find him. I swear to God I will." Catherine, he held her hand through the iron bars, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Don't lose your faith. God has a plan. Remember Joseph in Egypt. What man planned for evil, God transforms into good. Silas Merchant whipped the horses. The wagon began to move. No! Catherine ran after her, stumbling in the mud, her white dress stained with dirt. Elijah! Elijah! Two enslaved men held her back, preventing her from running any further. Catherine collapsed to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. The colonel watched everything from the balcony, his face like stone. But Mammy Ruth, who witnessed the scene from the shadows, saw something no one else noticed, a slight glint in Silas Merchant's eyes when he looked back. It wasn't cruelty. It was something different, something she couldn't decipher. In the following days, Catherine refused to eat. She locked herself in her room, reading and rereading the biblical passages that Elijah loved. Jeremiah 29:11 became her anchor. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Her father tried to force her to attend balls and introduce her to suitable suitors, but Catherine refused them all with cold politeness. You will marry Jonathan Pemberton by the end of the year, the colonel declared after 3 months. This rebellion will end. Catherine simply stared at him. You can sell Elijah, father, but you can't sell my heart. What no one knew was that at that very moment, more than 1,000 kilometers away, Elijah was living a reality completely different from the one everyone imagined. And the truth was more extraordinary than anyone could have dreamed. The journey to the north had been long and deliberately theatrical. Silas Merchant kept Elijah and the other enslaved people chained until they crossed the Maryland border. But when the wagon finally stopped at an isolated farm, something impossible happened. Silas got out of the cab and with firm hands began to remove the handcuffs from each person. You are free, he said, his gruff voice softening. My real name is Samuel Blackwell. I'm an abolitionist. I work with the Underground Railroad. The silence was deafening. Elijah stared at his own freed hands in disbelief. Is this a trap? Asked a woman named Sarah, trembling. It's not a trap, Samuel replied, removing his hat. I pretend to be a cruel slave trader so I can buy them from southern masters and free them in the north. Each of you can now choose your own destiny. Elijah fell to his knees right there, tears streaming freely down his face. Lord Jesus, you haven't abandoned me. Samuel helped him to his feet. Your faith impressed the colonel more than you can imagine, young man. That's why he chose to sell you to me. He knew. Or did you know what? That I'm not who I pretend to be. Thomas Ashford and I studied together at Harvard 30 years ago. He never truly believed in slavery, but he is bound by the expectations of the South, by his position. When he realized what was happening between you and Catherine, he panicked. Selling you to me was his twisted way of protecting you both. Elijah sat heavily on a log. Catherine, she must be devastated. She is, Samuel confirmed. I received a letter from a contact in Georgia. The girl isn't eating, she isn't sleeping, she's wasting away. I need to go back to her. No! Samuel grabbed him by the shoulders. If you go back now, you'll be re-enslaved immediately. Or worse, hanged as a fugitive. You need to build a life here first. Become a man that even Colonel Ashford can't ignore. And how will I do that? I'm a freed slave without a penny, without a formal education. Samuel smiled. You know how to read, don't you? Catherine taught you. And you have something more valuable than money, determination and faith. I know people in Boston, Quakers who run schools for free black people. You can study there. Study? Elijah's eyes lit up. Law, if you will. Become a lawyer, fight for justice through the laws that bind us, transform the system from within. Elijah gazed at the starry sky. Joseph in Egypt, from prison to the palace. God truly had a plan. How long would it take? 5 years, maybe 6. 6 years. Elijah closed his eyes. Catherine would be 25 years old. She would already be married, probably with children. As if reading his thoughts, Samuel added, "Or you can give up now and ensure she never has the chance to choose her own destiny. What kind of man do you want to be, Elijah?" The answer came clear as crystal in his heart. He would not fight only for himself. He would fight for all those who were still imprisoned, for all the Catherines and Elijahs who needed a different world. "When do we start?" he asked, a renewed firmness in his voice. Samuel extended his hand. "Tomorrow at dawn. Welcome to freedom, brother." Boston, 1859. Winter was merciless for those who had grown up under the Georgia sun. Elijah walked through the snow-covered streets, carrying books borrowed from the Quaker library, his fingers numb with cold. He shared a tiny room with 3 other freedmen, all of whom were studying voraciously. At night, by the dim light of a candle, Elijah devoured treatises on constitutional law, while his calloused hands, hardened by the fields, learned to hold the pen delicately. "You're dreaming too big, Elijah," mocked Marcus, one of his roommates. "A black lawyer? That doesn't exist." "It doesn't exist yet," Elijah corrected, without taking his eyes off Blackstone's commentaries. "But it will." Every night, before going to sleep, he would pick up his worn Bible and read Philippians 4:13. "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." And he would think of Catherine. Had she already gotten married? Did she still remember him? In Georgia, Catherine was also fighting her own battle. She had refused 6 marriage proposals. The colonel had become a more somber man, drinking more, speaking less. "Why are you punishing me like this?" he finally exploded one night. "All I did was protect you." "Protect?" Catherine stared at him with steely eyes. "You ripped my heart from my chest and sold it to a stranger." "He wasn't a stranger," Thomas blurted out, immediately regretting it. Catherine froze. "What?" But the colonel had already left the room, leaving only the echo of his words and a mystery that Catherine couldn't decipher. In 1861, the Civil War broke out, North against South. Elijah, now 28 years old and an advanced law student, found himself facing a choice: join the Union Army or continue his studies. "You can do more with a pen than with a rifle," advised Samuel Blackwell, who had become his mentor and father figure. "Finish your studies. War will create a new world. That world will need men like you to build justice." Elijah followed the advice, but the war brought changes for everyone. The Riverside plantation was partially burned by Union troops. Colonel Ashford suffered a stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed, and Catherine, now 24 years old, took over the management of what remained of the property. That's when she found the letters. Hidden in a secret drawer in her father's office were letters exchanged between Thomas Ashford and Samuel Blackwell over 5 years. She read them all with trembling hands. "The boy is progressing magnificently. He will be a lawyer within 2 years. Keep him safe, Samuel, and keep him away from here until he's strong enough." Does Catherine still ask about him? Every day. She didn't give up. Catherine collapsed into the leather chair, the letters scattered around her. Elijah was alive, free, studying law. His father had not sold him to death, but to life. Then the tears came, years of pain and confusion finally making sense, but anger also came along with them. Why hadn't they told him? Why had they let her suffer, thinking Elijah was lost forever in some cotton field in New Orleans? In 1864, Elijah Marshall, he had chosen a surname meaning defender, graduated from Boston Night School in law. He was the second black man in all of New England to achieve this feat. On graduation day, Samuel handed her an envelope. "It's time," he said simply. Inside, there was a train ticket to Georgia. April 1865. The Civil War was over. The South was in ruins. and a man of elegant bearing, wearing an impeccable dark suit and carrying a leather briefcase, stepped off the train at Savannah Station. Elijah Marshall had left as property. He returned as a free citizen, a qualified lawyer, and with something more precious than any diploma, a purpose. The journey to the Riverside plantation took 2 days. When he finally arrived, his heart sank. The grand white mansion was stained with soot, several windows were broken, and the once magnificent garden was now overgrown with weeds. But she was still there. Catherine was in the garden, on her knees, planting something in the ground. Her simple cotton dress was dirty, her hair loosely tied up. She had become a woman who worked with her own hands. When she looked up and saw him at the gate, time stood still. "Elijah," she whispered, as if she feared it was a ghost. "Catherine," he replied, and his voice was different, deeper, firmer, the voice of a man who had faced the world and won. She ran. She simply ran, forgetting everything: decoration, society, rules. She ran to him, and Elijah caught her in his arms, spinning her around, both laughing and crying at the same time. "You're alive! You're here!" she repeated, touching her face as if she needed to confirm that it was real. "Forgive me for taking so long," Elijah said, wiping the tears from her face with his thumb. "But I needed to come back a man worthy of you." "You've always been worthy of me," Catherine retorted. "Always." "I've come to find you, Catherine Ashford," Elijah declared, taking her hands, "not as a slave begging for favors, but as a free man offering his heart. I've come to ask for your hand in marriage, if you still want me, if I still—" Catherine laughed through her tears. "Elijah Marshall, I waited 6 years. I turned down 8 marriage proposals. I defied my father, society, everything. Of course I still want him." That's when a faint voice came from the balcony. "Then marry him, you stubborn girl." Catherine and Elijah turned around. Colonel Thomas Ashford stood there, leaning on a cane, the left side of his body visibly affected by the stroke, but his eyes were clear. "Dad," Catherine began. "No," Thomas raised his hand. "Let me speak." "Elijah, come closer." Elijah climbed the steps slowly, stopping before the man who had once been his owner. "You've become the man I never dared to be," Thomas said, his voice trembling. "I was a coward. I hid behind traditions, society, fear. You faced everything. Samuel told me about your studies, your achievements. You honor the name you chose. Coronel Ashford." "Thomas," the old man interrupted. "Call me Thomas. I'm no longer a colonel of anything. This world is over. Thank God." He extended his trembling hand. "You have my blessing. Marry my daughter. Build the family she deserves." Elijah shook his hand, decades of pain and forgiveness flowing in that gesture. 2 months later, in June 1865, an unprecedented ceremony took place in the small chapel of the old Riverside plantation. Catherine Ashford, the colonel's daughter, married Elijah Marshall, a black lawyer, before a mixed congregation of formerly enslaved people and whites who had the courage to attend. Samuel Blackwell was the best man. Mammy Ruth cried more than the bride, and Thomas Ashford walked his daughter down the aisle, bowed but present. "Who will hand this woman over?" asked the pastor, a black man named Reverend Joshua. "I surrender," Thomas said, his voice firm, "and I beg forgiveness for almost losing her because of my own cowardice." The ceremony was simple, yet powerful. When Elijah kissed his wife, applause echoed through the rebuilt chapel. But their story was only just beginning. Elijah established the first law firm run by a black person in Georgia. He dedicated himself to defending formerly enslaved people in land disputes, cases of violence, and the fight for civil rights. Catherine worked alongside him, using her privileged education to teach black children to read and write. Together, they transformed the Riverside plantation into a school. The fields that once produced cotton through suffering now produced hope through education. Thomas Ashford lived long enough to see his 3 grandchildren born. On the day of his death in 1868, he held Elijah's hand and whispered, "Thank you for being the man I wasn't. Thank you for loving my daughter as she deserves." Years later, when Elijah was 70 years old and a respected lawyer who had helped draft civil rights laws in Georgia, a young journalist asked him, "Mr. Marshall, don't you feel anger about what you've suffered? About the years that were stolen from you?" Elijah looked at Catherine, now with white hair but still with the same bright blue eyes, sitting next to him on the porch swing. "Anger," he repeated thoughtfully. "I felt a lot of anger, yes, but I learned something the Bible always tried to teach me. What man planned for evil, God transforms into good. If I hadn't been sold, I would never have studied. If I hadn't studied, I couldn't have helped thousands of people achieve their rights. If I hadn't left, I wouldn't have come back strong enough to build the future my children deserve." He intertwined his fingers with Catherine's. "True love is not that which never faces trials. It is that which goes through the fire and emerges purified. Our story was not easy, but it was ours. And through it, God showed that no chain is strong enough to shackle the human heart when it refuses to give up." Catherine kissed her hand. "And you never gave up." "We never gave up," he corrected, smiling. "This story reminds us that love, when grounded in faith and justice, can move mountains of injustice. That true freedom begins in the heart, but must manifest itself in concrete actions." Elijah and Catherine proved that the greatest barriers can be overcome when we refuse to accept the world as it is and fight for the world as it should be. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who needs to believe that love and justice can overcome any adversity. Together, we continue writing stories of hope and transformation.